Thank you, everyone. I would like to reconvene the Thursday, January 25th, 2024 meeting of the Lake Forest Board of Education. If you would join me for Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Very welcome to everyone who has joined in person, as well as those who have joined online. Just a reminder that we are streaming tonight's meeting across the World Wide Web. And that recording, as well as the meeting minutes, will be posted once they are approved. Start tonight with roll call of board members. Dr. Wyatt.
Present.
Mrs. McCloskey.
Here.
Mrs. Starkey.
Here.
Vice President Rao. Here. And President Earl Benson serving as chairs here as well. All five board members are present this evening. Thank you all for being here. We're up to 2.4 approval of agenda, Mr. Rao. I make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried 5-0.
Item 2.5, approval of minutes. I make a motion we approve the meeting minutes from the January 11th executive and regular session as written.
Second.
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Questions or discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Motion carries 4-0 with one abstention. 2.6 recognition presentations. We had a very nice one scheduled this evening, but last minute it has been postponed. So we will look forward to hearing from the Lake Forest Community Education Foundation at a future meeting. We are up to 2.7 citizens participation, opportunity for members of the public to address the board. We asked that anyone who was interested in addressing the board to sign up at the table at the front and present their form to the superintendent's office. I do not believe we have anyone signed up this evening. So we will close public comment and we'll reopen again in 2 weeks at our next meeting. We're up to section 3, reports. 3.1, student council report. We have Ms. Olivia Wood with us. Welcome.
So the BPA is preparing for our state leadership conference, which will be held in February. 6 students will be competing this year. For the student council, there will be a blood drive held on February 14th, 2024 in the auxiliary gym from 8 to 3 p.m. The link is posted on Schoology to sign up. And just this past January, on January 22nd, the staff held an international luncheon sponsored by the Equity Committee.
Thank you, Lily. Appreciate it. Any questions or discussion for Ms. Wood? Again, remind us, what year are you and what is your position?
I am a senior this year, and my name is Lily Wood, and I am the
President, Vice President, Treasurer,
I'm the
Secretary?
treasurer.
You're
I'm the
treasurer. Fantastic. Get ours in the money. All right, thank you very much. We look forward to hearing from you through the rest of the school year as well. And good luck with the second semester.
Thank you.
All right, we're up to 3.2 financial reports. Mr. Kurt Kellerman. Welcome, Mr. Kellerman.
Good evening. So the first item on the docket for this evening is the final adjusted budget. And after finalization of several state funding sources from unit count, we now have a much better revenue picture here in January. And so that's what we'll review tonight is mainly those big changes on the revenue side, although there are some changes on the expenditure side as well. So what I have identified there on the revenue budget there is areas that the prominent areas and the 2 biggest and most important changes that you'll see there are the Division 2 and Division 3 numbers in blue. Since those significantly increased our discretionary revenues. So 569,000 on the Division 2 all other costs as we cashed in 8 Division 1 teacher units this year. And then over 243,000 in the Division 3 because we earned 13 units over what we earned last year. So quite a bit more. So we pick up those additional funds that go along with the additional 13 units. Other areas, formula salaries has been adjusted upward based on the higher unit count, of course. But in reference to the cashed in units, I just want to reiterate that, we would much rather fill those vacant positions if we could. But when we get to a certain point in the year and we just see that it doesn't look like we're gonna fill them, then we take the next best option, and that's to cash them in. And so we still keep these positions posted. And we try to fill them, and sometimes we do fill them throughout the year. But in those instances, we would just utilize these cashed in resources that we have to pay for those teachers then, if we did manage to hire some people. And again, when we talk about cashed in positions, we are only allowed to cash in up to 8 positions. When we put this in for the cash in report, we had much more than 8 positions that we could have cashed in. But we knew that at some point we would fill several of those positions. So we were comfortable though with about 8 that we could cash in.
The
So,
question on cashing in, is there, I'm assuming there's a cutoff date to do that. What is the cutoff date in the school year to cash?
so the cutoff date is December 31st. Yeah. Now, we had turned ours in probably by the end of November because we already had a good idea of what that picture was gonna look like. So. I've also annotated the state transportation and unique alternatives increases on there, and those are depicted only because there's a local funding component tied to those. So with the state transportation, of course, we have to pick up 10% on the local side. And then that unique alternatives is what Ms. Allman presented last week when we talked about their tuition and the outside placements. So we pick up 30% on that one. That's where the state picks up 70%. We pick up 30% of that cost. There's a little bit of a revision on the current expense tax receipts. Those were lowered based on what we're seeing right now with the collection rates. It's nothing troubling, but and then other local revenue was also increased to account for the indirect costs that we are expecting to take from that ESSER 3 or that CARES grant, the final one we have. So those are the big items there. As you can see, that total discretionary funds number is being bumped up by $886,000. That's quite a bit in terms of what we see for the revenue picture. Any questions on the revenue budget?
Questions for Mr. Kellerman with the revenue?
Okay. So as we move on to the expenditure, I guess, and again, this is just the discretionary expenditure budget. The red highlighted numbers reflect the budget revision increases or a cost increase, and the green ones reflect a budget revision decrease or a cost decrease. And so the schools are just, that minor play with the enrollment, nothing significant. For instance, Chipman and Lake Forest are just down single digits from what we had projected in the preliminary budget. So really nothing significant there. The contracted teaching staff, that was cashing in a unit with the expectation that we were going to pay for a contracted position. And then further down is that specialized education agreement. And so that's that High Roads North Elementary classroom that we have there. And so as a result of the 8 students that were in that classroom, those 8 students earned us 3 additional units, and those were 3 units that we cashed in to pay for this program. So, and then whatever wasn't covered with those units that we cashed in, we cover on the tuition side. So, and this is all one of those measures that we're taking to try to lower those tuition costs that we're seeing, because we're seeing an increase in all these other different areas. So we're trying to kind of rein them in where we can. And this is one area where we're able to rein them in a little bit. So. Homebound was also increased slightly as we see a trend in the increased students on homebound instruction as we move further into the school year. And then under the finance section, that's the last of the changes there. So that increased over 400,000 mainly for 2 factors. One being the Kelly substitute rates. So not only did the rate go up, which we fully anticipated, but we're also seeing more sub requests. And of course, we were expecting that too. We just weren't sure how much, but with that legislation that passed last year where the number of personal days allowed went from 3 to 5, we fully expected that there would be more people taking advantage of that as well. And we expect to see that throughout the fiscal year. So that's one reason for the increase in 400,000. The other one's a little bit more convoluted, and hopefully I'll be able to explain it well. So the main factor, is the Delaware Early Childhood Center, and it changes how we, address the Division II and Division III funds that they earn as a result of their increased units from unit count. And so, DEC increased their unit count this year by 44%. They went from like 8.6 to 12.4 units this year. And so, their enrollment went from 53 to 70, but that also means that with that increased unit count, there's increased staffing costs, because that's, they're now allowed to hire 12.4 staff, teacher units. Well, there's the local component that goes with that as well. So not just the state salary. So there's the 30% that we have to cover. And that amount comes from our tuition and our tuition tax and our tuition expenses. So here's another case of trying to rein in those tuition expenses. And so as a result of them earning that 12.4 units this year, they get there's a corresponding Division II and Division III costs that are increased as well as a result of them earning those additional units. And so that amount equates to about close to $300,000. And so what we're doing this year is we're basically saying, instead of that coming out of the DEC's local funds, which we will end up paying the tuition bill, we're going to cover it out of this discretionary source, because it's the increase in unit count that's driving this for them. And so basically it's a little bit of a shell game, but we're covering it out of our discretionary costs in order to lower our tuition costs. So because otherwise we would have seen a really hefty tuition bill this year from DEC as a result of having 12.6 units. So this is one of those areas where we're trying to keep that tuition tax flat. We don't want to increase it if we don't have to, because we already have an increase in the tax rate as a result of the referendum and the current expense tax. So that's really the main reason that we're going this route and trying to save some tuition costs there. Any questions about that dynamic there?
Questions about that particular topic? So what would we do next year?
So I think we have some flexibility there. So if we see that tuition costs are coming back down and we can afford to, that is an authorized tuition expense. So we could use tuition funds to pay for it, but it doesn't require us to use tuition funds to pay for it. So that's where it gets into, Delaware code. This is what you're authorized to use tuition funds for. But there's several areas where we could use tuition funds, but don't, just to try to keep those tuition expenses down. So.
Yeah, I mean, 300,000 to 400,000 increase. I mean, that's a lot to continue to stomach out of local funds. So we can either fund it through tuition tax increase, we can continue to fund it through local funds, or we can blend it, right? We could fund it partially through a tuition tax increase, partially.
We could,
local funds.
yeah.
Anything else on that particular topic?
Okay.
Revenue, are you done with, expenses?
The other part was the charter choice. You can see there, we did see an increase of 17 students that went out to the charter schools, but we also saw a net increase in the school choice funds. So that kind of helped balance that out. So it's a very minimal increase on the charter choice enrollment side there. So total expenditure revision, it's up 595,000. So, but that still leads, we're talking a surplus now of 764,000 compared to what we presented on the preliminary budget. Any questions on that portion there?
Questions on the expenditures? So I did have one. So, I'm not asking you to change the report. It is great on the revenue side that we can see the items that have changed and what the delta is. On the expenditure, though, we don't have that delta. So I printed last month's, what was it? Yeah, the December financial report.
Okay.
To see what each of these categories were there, to see what the change was. And most of them were very minor, but I couldn't rectify, and maybe I missed it, but I kept looking and looking and looking. I couldn't rectify contracted teaching staff and specialized education agreement K-5. I couldn't find a line item that was named that.
For the monthly,
Yes.
board reports that we have.
Everything else, there was a matching item on the board report.
Right, so that contracted teaching staff was not even on there at the time. When we
So
created
that's
that
completely new.
preliminary budget, that's a brand new,
So not the, okay, so the preliminary budget, which would have carried through to the board report up until now.
right,
January's board report will have this as a new.
January's will reflect this,
Okay.
what you approved tonight.
Okay, and then how about the specialized education agreement?
And so that was on that first page of the expenditure side of the board report, and it was up under the special schools tuition.
Okay,
And it was probably at the lower amount, because we weren't expecting to have a full classroom of, 8 students there.
but this is the, this
But
is
it's
what
the
it
same
says.
category.
Same name, okay,
Yep.
I just missed that one then.
Okay.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, so I present the district reserve up there just to show you where we ended last fiscal year at $4.5 million. And then as we go on to the next slide, you can see using that surplus of 764,000 that was depicted on the budget as it's depicted on the budget. That would project out to be a $5.3 million reserve at the end of the year. Now, when I get to the financial position report, which is the next item on the agenda, we'll talk about where I think we're gonna end, because what typically happens is we underspend the budget. So we underspend the budget each year from anywhere from like 2 to 5%. When I looked over the past several years. And so when you factor that in, that projected reserve could go higher as well. So we'll see that on the financial position report. And then the last item that I wanted to show was just the causes of that surplus. So if anybody had kind of a question of, what's driving the surplus that we have. So the constable program, we had fully expected to cover out of local funds. And so using the state's safety and security funds, there's 350,000 that's being covered by another funding source right now for as long as it lasts. So I know the governor's recommended budget came out today. I didn't look to see if they put anything different in there for school safety. But if they did, it will show up in the governor's budget. So unit growth, 13 teacher units. I mean, you can see on the graph there where we've been in terms of Division I units over the last several years. And this is far off the chart in terms of what we had in the past. So with that, you get those Division II and Division III revenues that flow with those Division I units. And so we see increased revenues from the state on those as well. And then the vacant units that we cashed in that are not associated with the High Road School, that's what you see there, the 380,000. So those are all contributors to why we're seeing this surplus right now. Any questions about that?
Any questions for the board?
So that's all I have for the presentation for the final adjusted budget. If you're ready, we can move on to the financial position report then.
Thanks.
So this is the report that reflects mid-year snapshot of our financial health. It's the second report this year, and then the final one will be reflect the projections as of March 31st. But our projected 1 month payroll has gone up in the upper right-hand corner to 820,000. I think in the past, it's been 760 to 780. So, but with the increase, not only with the units that we have, so we have the corresponding increase in local funds, but then also our increase from our contract that we signed for this, starting this fiscal year with the pay rates that we had. So that's why we see 820,000 there. So moving over to the top left, we have that actual unencumbered for local expenses in the top left, and that's our cash on hand. And so that's sitting at 10.2 million. So we will eventually eat into that for the rest of these 6 months. So as we move over to the middle, we've got that projected available balance on 331 of local funds. You can see it drops down to 8.7 million. And then projected for the end of the fiscal year, 630, 5.9 million. So even though on that final adjusted budget, we're looking at a 5.3 million projected reserve based on the surplus that's on that budget. We know historically that we underspend that budget by about 2 to 5%. And so There's where you see the projected balance there for, June 30th. So yeah. That is where we stand. We would be looking at going from 4.5 million up to 5.9 million potentially for, our district reserve at the end of the year. Any questions on the financial position report?
Any questions on this report or anything else for Mr. Coleman, Mrs. McCloskey?
Just real quick, so based on the PowerPoint with numbers before underspending, we're at 5.2, not so 5.3, and you're saying that you think it's gonna be more like, what did we just say?
5.9.
5.9, so that's a big difference.
Yeah. So that's underspending another 5% probably.
Yeah.
So
Anyone else?
that's about where we were last year. We underspent about 5% on the budget.
All right, thank you, Mr. Coleman. So both of these items will come up for a vote later in the meeting, and a financial position report will be signed and sent to BOE, correct?
Correct.
And if you could just get with me after the meeting, because I looked back and I still couldn't find that category there. So I'll just ask for some assistance from you. All right, thank you, Mr. Kellerman. We are up to 3.3 Superintendent Report. Dr. Lucas.
Great, good evening, everybody. I always like to start my address with some celebrations and thank yous. Of course, my first thank yous go out to Mr. Starr and the custodial staff. While we were all home in our beds, they were all clearing the parking lots and sidewalks so we could get into our schools and offices as soon as possible. We really appreciate that. The other group of folks that we could not recognize enough for the good work is our teachers and support staff in the schools. I make it a point to try to get in classrooms every school, every week. And I'm always impressed at the level of rigor and engagement going on. So I want to send a huge thank you out to our teachers and paras working directly with our students to let them know we see the good work they're doing and appreciate it very much. So please carry that message back to them. As Mr. Dempsey mentioned, Lake Forest Community Education Foundation was going to be here tonight to recognize the recipients of the grants for this year. So we will be sure to recognize these folks at a future board meeting. As everybody knows, we've entered the third marking period, which means we're in the back half of the school year already. If anyone listening or reading these remarks has any concerns about their students' progress or growth, I urge them to reach out to their child's school just as soon as possible so we can address those concerns right away. Just a few calendar reminders during my report. God willing, we'll have a couple of 5-day school weeks here for the next 2 weeks. And then we are out of school on Monday, February 12th for parent-teacher conferences, and then again on February 19th for President's Day. Let's hope those are the only interruptions to instruction this month. Then on February 23rd, it's one of the best events of the year. We celebrate Black History Month at Lake Forest High School. That event starts at 6 p.m. over at the high school, and you will not want to miss that, February 23rd. That's all I have. Thank you. Yield the floor back to President Dempsey for any questions or discussion.
Questions or discussion for Dr. Lucas and Superintendent's report? So yes, Mr. Starr, thank you to the men and women of your staff and for the storms of the century, at least of the last 2 years, right? The snow drought that everyone had talked about. Appreciate all the hard work. We're up to 3.4 LFEA report. This is Heather Hitchens. Welcome, Mrs. Hitchens.
Thank you. Normally I get to sit in the back and hide, so today you get to bear with me. Anita's at a legislative dinner, so we are thankful for her support. I just wanted to say for the snow day, it was our new contract. So for success for that with the staff language going out, thanks to our admin for sending that out and our members and our reps. We had some questions about the Kent County offices, but we just remind everybody they're not in our contract anymore. So we appreciate everybody's snow language. Mr. Dick, the choice board was amazing. We thank you and your team for putting that together and just giving our staff some alternatives to PD hours. We have I Love Lake Day coming. We had our union meeting and we finally decided that we are going to do a gift card tree for our students. They will be able to do the kudos and needs for improvement like last year for the bikes. And this year they can actually earn gift cards. We have also decided we're gonna do the pie in the face contest again. So I think I heard everybody volunteer tonight. We'll put that on the record. No, the kids really love that. It's a great time. We're just gonna split up in the middle so that there's a bigger audience, but we're really, I think that's just a really good time. So if anybody wants, and let's see, Mrs. Hancock at Central is like the best baker. so we can get a really good pie made, I'm just saying. So if you volunteer, I'll make sure it's a really good piece of pie. As Dr. Lucas stated, we are in the third marking period. It feels like just yesterday we started our welcome back. So that attributes to the success of our students and our staff, that we are moving along so well and in a superior way. Anita and I had the opportunity Monday to travel to each school and see our teachers working so hard. They are really doing excellent work, and we are so grateful for them. So we just wanted to say thank you to our district, thank you to our admin and the board and our district for working with LFEA. We look forward to the next step. Thank
Hey,
you.
Ms. Hitchens, any questions or discussion for Mrs. Hitchens and LFPA report? Thank you again for everything that you and Anita and all of our staff do every day. Thank you. All right, we are on to section 4, unfinished business. 4.1 board policies, second reading is an action item, Mr. Rath.
I make a motion, we approve resolution 4.1 board policy, second reading as modified with any.
A motion on the floor properly seconded. As typical, we will move through each of these individually. These are second readings, so we do anticipate them to go fairly quickly as we have reviewed them once already. So we'll start this evening with DG, Banking Services. Any discussion on DG? Seeing none, move on to EDB, Maintenance and Control of Materials and Equipment. Any discussion on this policy? So none, move on to GB, EBE, Staff Conduct, Electronic Communication and Devices. Any discussion on this policy? That's just one overarching question, and Mr. Al specifically, maybe ask your advice or input on this. So you know, over the years, we have made it a concern of the board that we followed the NEPM manual. And we've come across some policies in the past that have not been part of there, and we've worked to eliminate those. Now we're having some of these come up that are council driven. Is there any way that we, for posterity's sake and maybe even future board's sake, that there's some type of notation here, or even administration keeps track somehow of these that are added outside of NEPN and why? That way, 3 years from now, when it's new board members and they're wondering, well, why was this policy added? That without the institutional knowledge present, that it's recorded.
So I may be wrong, but do we not already have some policies that have notations in them? For example, some of the Delaware Code ones that just have a notation at the bottom. I mean, for me, that would be the safest place to put it, is put a notation at the very bottom of the policy that says if this policy does not exist, similar to the note that we already saw. I don't see an issue with having something like that at the very bottom of the footnote of the policy. And then just do that for all of them, as opposed to having some kind of, you know, syllabus or something else, somewhere else that has a list of those that no one has access to.
And the reason I bring it up
It's
is
it's out there and everyone can see it.
the reason I bring it up is I know that specifically during our tenure, we've come across some of these to where we can't understand why it was added, but at some point in time, there was a reason it was added, and none of us knows why. And this maybe eliminate that for the future.
Yeah, that's, I mean, with putting me on, without giving it more thought than the 30 seconds I was giving.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's my initial reaction. But I guess I would go one step further too. Obviously, it's not an issue we can solve. But I would assume that at some point there are updates made to that handbook, because as we go through time and evolve, there are policies that are needed that are not mainstays in that initial. So I would think that over time, something, for example, like that could pop up. And if that is the case, we need to make sure that we have the same name convention.
We align,
Yeah.
choose to align. I haven't found any update to that over the course of my tenure.
They no longer publish an
It
updated
doesn't,
manual.
They no longer publish.
It's that manual's almost over 20 years old.
Okay,
Well,
and that's what we choose to align ourselves.
I was gonna say, so we're-
We did back then, and it was, there's still districts in
But
Delaware.
there's still,
That's still our law.
like no there's been no replacement for that. There's been no new tool come along for boards to follow.
Now, those districts that do not follow the NEPN, they create their own filing system, usually by numbers, section 100, 200, 300, so on and so forth. I believe Indian River, Cesar Rodney, maybe Appaquiddick. There's a handful of districts in Delaware that still use the NEPN codes.
Okay, so I guess my question is, if we came up with a footnote, is there any reason that that should not be included in the publicly available?
No, I think it should be included.
Okay. All right, do we feel that that footnote would need to be reviewed again, or can we just ask administration to come up with an appropriate footnote?
I would just have them come up with a perfect footnote, and my recommendation would be to use the same footnote consistently throughout all of them, instead of having a different one along the lines.
Unless, are you gonna put an explanation in there? Like, do you think it needs a small explanation on here or just on record, like with admin?
Well, so that's a great point. So I think maybe a date would be appropriate as to when the policy was added and potentially a reason. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it could, and the reason could just be,
At advice of council or?
right, I mean, there's, as a recommendation of council for board statewide, which is essentially what this is, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, does administration feel comfortable handling that? Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rapp. All right, we're on to ICA, school calendar. Any discussion on ICA? All right, seeing none, we go on to JICJ. Use of cell phones and electronic devices in school. Discussion on this policy.
Like,
Yes, Ms. McCloskey.
I'm not being nitpicky at all. Because I'm not the nitpicky one, like, I just don't normally, but I feel like we've tried to really be consistent. And then I feel like I'm lost in whether it was something we were consistent in or not, but with the, or designate. We added commas all the time for that, right? And then sometimes it's still coming up without them. I've just been like, my eyes have been trained to that every time I've seen designee about, because we've been talking about whether designee was appropriate or not appropriate. So that every time designee's in there, it kind of draws my eye.
So we are on ICA.
Yeah, sorry.
That's
was-
okay.
It came to me.
Then that's.
Yep, okay. Yep, add it. Thank you.
Just consistency, because I feel like if not, I'm gonna think about it. I don't know why, but.
All right, thank you, Mr. McCloskey. So JICJ, use of cell phones. So my question was, so we basically scrapped the majority of this policy. We have a statement there, student use of cell phones outlined in student code of conduct. I think, and it says the board will vote to approve. Is that what we've had there each time, or have we just done away with each policy? I couldn't remember. We've had that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
so we've still had the policy, but it just referred to the, okay, yes, thank you. All right, seeing nothing else, move to JJE, student fundraising activities. Questions or discussion on this policy? All right, moving on to JJEA in active internal accounts. Discussion on JJEA. Seeing none, move on to LBA, student teaching and internships. Discussion on our final policy. All right, seeing none. We have a motion on the floor and second, and any final discussion on our second readings? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 5-0. We're up to section 8 personnel resignations. Mr. Rapp.
I make a motion to approve resolution 8.1 as written.
Second.
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, move to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 5-0.
Section 9 personnel retirements. I make a motion to approve resolution 9.1 and 9.2 as written.
Second.
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, move to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 5-0.
Section 11, personnel transfers. I make a motion, we approve resolution 11.1 as written.
Second.
Have a motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? I will just say that this, while it's labeled a transfer, this appears to be a bit of a promotion, so just congratulations to Mr. Shin. With that said, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 5-0.
Section 13, personnel offers of employment. I make a motion, we approve resolutions 13.1 through 13.4 as written.
Second.
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion?
For me, as I see a former student, 13.4, it's good to see those coming back.
Great observation. Seeing no further discussion, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 5-0.
Section 15, personnel leaves of absence. I make a motion, we approve resolutions 15.1 through 15.4 as written.
Second.
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 5-0.
Staying in section 15, personnel leaves of absence. I make a motion, we approve resolution 15.5 as written.
Second.
Motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? Nay?
Nay.
Any abstentions? Motion fails 5-0. 0-5, excuse me.
Section 19, personnel appointments. I make a motion, we approve resolution 19.1 as written.
Second.
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Staying,
Motion carries 4-0 with one abstention.
staying in section 19, personnel appointments. I make a motion to table resolution 19.2.
Second.
A motion on the floor properly seconded to table 19.2. Questions or discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 5-0.
Section 21, other business. I make a motion, we approve resolution 21.1, school board as written.
Second.
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Questions or discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 5-0.
Section 22, other business field trips. I make a motion, we approve resolutions 22.1 through 22.4 as written.
Second.
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 5-0.
And finally, section 23, other business financial reports. I make a motion to approve resolution 23.1, the financial position report and the final budget as presented tonight.
Second.
A motion on the floor properly seconded. Any questions or discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Rao. Thank you, Mrs. Starkey. We're up to section 25 board reports, discussion items 25.1. Go to the order, opportunity for board members to address any topic not covered elsewhere on the agenda. The board is open. Mrs. Starkey.
I saw a Facebook post, but just about the winter sports, just how amazing they're doing. I think wrestling's still undefeated, right? Earl, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, wrestling's undefeated, boys basketball is undefeated. And I'm just gonna put a shameless plug in right now. We play Seaford, who's the other undefeated team, on Tuesday night at Lake Forest High School at 5:45. So I'd love to see everyone come out and support those boys. Shameless, I know, but I don't care.
Thank you, Mrs. Starkey. Anything from any other board members?
No one has anything. I know I'm going to miss my segment last meeting when I was unable to attend, but
Do you want to go before? I have a couple things. Do you want to go now or do you want to wrap it up?
you know what? Let's wrap it up with that.
Okay, all right,
That's a good.
so, all right, cool. With bated breath.
Yeah, that the suspense is coming over me.
I just want to say, like, yeah, it's great to see these field trips, going to DC. When I left college, I moved over to DC for a year, and it was a really cool thing for me every Friday night to be going out in the city where I went to field trips to see, but also met a lot of colleagues who had never seen it as a child, had never gotten that experience, and we are just so lucky to be so close. So it's great that our staff takes advantage of this for our students, and hopefully, if our students don't appreciate it now, that eventually they will. The other thing I wanted to share, again, it's that time of the year. Remind everyone about statewide school board elections. School board elections will be held in May, the second Tuesday of May this year, which is Tuesday, May 14th. Anyone who is interested must sign up or throw their name in the hat with the State Department of Elections by the first Friday of March, which is March 1st, 2024. We do have one seat that will be up for election this year in our district. Forgot to check today, but as of yesterday, there had been no one filed to date. But we will continue to create this awareness at each and every board meeting. So if you're interested in helping give it back to your community, there's no better way to do it than joining the school. Mr. Rao, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. So to close this evening, there is an actual condition for having the fear of long words. And that condition happens to be a word that is 36 letters long. It is called Hippopotomonstransis quipdaliophobia, and it's from the Latin term, which means long word. So anyone that is diagnosed with that condition will never say it.
I am fearful already. Thank you, Mr. Rao.
I was gonna use my other one because I wore a tie tonight, and that is that the average person ties their tie so tight that 9% of the blood is cut off in their brains. Study was conducted.
That explains a lot of what happened in DC.
Well, please, sir.
Wow.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rao's useless knowledge corner. We appreciate it.
Again, there's anyone going.
All right, hearing nothing else, I do not believe we have a need for executive session. Mr. Mormon, Dr. Lucas, any board member. With that said, we'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
A motion on the floor properly seconded for adjournment. Questions or discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 5-0. I failed to mention our next board meeting will be in 2 weeks. Thursday, February 8th. And Mrs. Simpson, we are back here, correct? You're not doing our road trips yet.
Not
Okay. Thursday, February 8th, back here, 7 o'clock. Everybody enjoy winter. Good luck with your third market. Cool.